All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are back for the 2023 season's final edition of Late Night with Borg and Brendan, as I've unofficially dubbed it without any input from Zach here. So maybe it sucks, but we'll find out. But
Yeah, it's a little tough to call it a post-game show when the game happened 3 days ago now. So
it's technically correct. It's technically after. Hope everybody made it safe back on their travels without damage or too grievous of delays that caused any problems in your travels. And no cars in the ditch, hopefully. So I know you got back before everybody else, but then for the wife and kiddo, it was a bit more of an adventure for you guys.
Yeah.
So it was pretty smooth for us.
Yeah, our Dakota News Now team, we were scheduled to stay through Monday, but we were obviously getting the weather reports, and Adam Huntemer, who was driving, it was his Suburban. We went in and loaded our gear in. We had four of us. It was him, myself, Mark Ovenden, and one of our news reporters, Parker Brown. We did all of our stuff at the stadium. We had a post-game show, which went live right after the ABC broadcast. We had a lot of interviews with guys. There was a 5:00 newscast that goes, from. Sorry, I missed you too, Brian. Like I said, I wish we could have stayed. We would have stayed, like I said, another night. But then we pretty much left right about 6:30. We recorded our stuff for some morning shows. I was editing and in the car, and he pretty much drove through the night. We made like 2 stops. I think we stopped in Wichita, or I think Oklahoma City. We stopped for some food and gas. We made another stop around Omaha, and we ended up getting back in town around 7. We beat the storm. I'd say about 7. It didn't turn. We didn't see the bad stuff until about 6 in the morning after we hit Sioux City. And when we got back to Sioux Falls, there was already about 5 inches, and I'm like, oh, God, that's not good. And my wife had tried to – they'd left right afterwards too, but they stayed overnight in Wichita. I'm like, ladies, you're not – my wife had gone up with my son, her sister, and a friend, and I'm like, you're not getting back tomorrow, hon. They wanted to get to Omaha, and I'm like, I think they only made it an hour out of Wichita. They got to Emporia. So, they got home last night at 5. I'm going to try and be a little quieter than normal. I know that's always been kind of my challenge is, oh, hey, Thayer, good to see you on there, buddy. Good to see you on the post-game show, dude. I'm going to try and be a little quieter because she actually picked up my pneumonia from a couple weeks ago and my son's ear infection. So we got the double whammy for her. But otherwise, I'm sure everybody Brendan and I kind of planned this a few weeks ago. We knew that there would be no post-game show right after the title game because we figured that I would probably be working and, especially if SDSU won, which we kind of expected. We didn't really figure the fans would be in very much shape to be doing a post-game show after a Natty. You should be rightfully partying after the Natty.
And if anybody saw my interview on Midco, I was in no state to be doing any form of show. Probably shouldn't have done that interview. I didn't realize it was live when it was going on, so I made a stupid joke at the start, and then all of a sudden it was, oh no, this is live. Oh, sick. I'm an idiot. But you guys put out a ton of stuff this week. So before we get rolling, and I know we're going to get all sorts of questions after and we'll get to that stuff, all the different things beyond the Natty after we talk about the game and the weekend and all that jazz, I think. But you guys is that all just found on your Twitter? Is it in one spot on the Dakota News Now site? Because a lot of people down there missed it.
There's a couple of good options. The Twitter page gives you the link to a lot of it. It's all on the Dakota News Now sports page. If you go to the sport, just go to dakotanewsnow.com. Sports. It's got a pretty. You scroll down, it's all pretty much there. We're also on YouTube as well. It's just Dakota News Now. I think they've actually got a playlist, which just says Road to Frisco, which I think actually has everything from this year that we've had, all the pregame, postgame shows. I think it even goes back to last year and the spring season that we had a few years ago. So I think you can relive it as far back as you want if you want to even relive the 2021 one. For better or worse, but Yeah, we have a lot of stuff. I mean, I still think, I actually want to see some more of the post game show because I didn't even get to see this in studio stuff we had because I know we had really good content with Thor, Eric Thorstensen, and Josh Anderson who were in studio. I mean, too late for me. Yeah, it's a little different than a Saturday night. I know a lot of people are going to have to work tomorrow, or maybe we're getting another round of snow. I don't know.
Right. Well, when I got back, I was thinking, man, this is gonna suck. I got to work tomorrow. I should have took the extra day off. I'm like, well, Borg probably has to go to work right away. And then joke's on me. I was back for 3 hours. I got called in, had to do some work.
No, it was pretty good actually. That's probably the longest day of work I ever put in because I don't think I slept much on the way back. It's a little tough to sleep in a car.
Yep.
But yeah, I pretty much I filed a few things when I got home, but I pretty much just passed out. I did not really work much the last couple of days. I just did some stuff from home. I'll actually go back into the station tomorrow and do a little more normal stuff. I think I'm gonna put together a story about the SDSU's kind of future. But yeah, there's a lot of content. We crushed it this week. I'm very proud of the product we put out, and it's been and I think one of the best things to tell you how much we had. There's a statistic that we got. Our news director told us that obviously we're owned by Gray. Our owner's called Gray Television, and they own something like 95 stations. So I mean, and it ranges from market size. I think we have some of them are like. We have some top 10 stations, in major markets. And on Sunday, I think we were the 4th highest viewed social media in terms of social websites, social media. We were the 4th highest viewed in the entire company. So, and now certainly there was some weather stuff going on too, but it was mostly a lot of our SDSU content driving the ship. We had some good stuff going on. We had our social media people back at the station. We're putting together a lot of good graphics during the game. And, yeah, I mean, it was just, we know it ever since we started having this game on KSFY, which obviously started, it just happened to start in that spring season. We know there was a mistake during that 2021 game, which we do not talk of anymore. But ever since that shall not be named, but ever since we ever since we knew the games were going to be on ABC, and it's going to continue apparently because they're going to be sup Zach. It was good meeting you down there as well in Frisco. Ever since we knew it was going to be on ABC, our owner, our general manager, Jim Berman, has made a huge commitment when SDSU's been in this game to really go all out. And we do. And I think it's shown. And people really responded this year. I think even it was big the previous 2 years, but I think it was even bigger this year. And I think I can't even compare. I wasn't down there a year ago, but I think even talking to some people who were, I think it was even bigger response this year.
It was wild. I think the tailgates were bigger. JFPA and then our tailgate together, I think that was bigger. Obviously second time down. It was awesome the first time, but Ben really knocked it out of the park. He did a lot of the legwork with that. He really knocked it out of the park for that tailgate. Getting to hang out with guys like Zach McKinnell. That was awesome. Got to take him to his first hockey game. Took him to the Stars Avs game. That was a lot of fun. I mean, couldn't ask for a better hockey game.
Also point out the Avs won that game, by the way. So
they did. And my wife's an Avs fan, and she was there. And that was her first NHL game. So couldn't have.
I wish I could have gone to that. That was the Thursday, right?
Yes. Yep.
Yeah. I wish I could have gone to that, but the Thursday was our busiest day of the media wise because we had media day and we were basically 8 to 10 that day. That was our busiest day by far. And I appreciate that, Dan. And I also got to shout out everybody I went down with, Mark, Hunty, Parker Brown, everybody, especially because as many of you know, I got pretty sick the week before with pneumonia and I had some asthma as well. That was, those guys really did carry me because I didn't have a chance to do any prep work the week before.
Right.
I didn't really know if I was going to be able to go. I got clearance from the doctors when I got discharged, but I didn't know if the station would be, I was 50-50 whether the station would even be comfortable with sending me because I would have frankly understood if they were, not willing to take the risk of, is he going to have a relapse or could he, because obviously if I had an issue down there, I'm in Texas.
Mhm.
It was a risk there, but but there wasn't really that much of a risk, honestly. I think I told him, I'm like, well, chances are it would have been tougher for me being back here solo, feeling like I have to go between 8 different games, which I usually do, as opposed to having 3 other people and having an actual team of people. So I felt it was like, and it was. They picked me up, and we all did really good work, and it was just a phenomenal. Like I said, we cooked. I used I used a couple of the Breaking Bad stuff, and I'll toot our own horn all the time, but this one was. I hope we'll put this in. I'm sure for some awards, and I hope we can get in for a few, because I would put a lot of what we did against anybody's. The pregame show we had was phenomenal. We didn't go live with that one. We taped it on Saturday, but that works a little better just because it's harder to go live from Frisco just because there's some more restrictions when it's up against the ABC thing. We had to be off the field at 12:30, right. And we do want to shoot pregame video as well. But it made more sense to tape it. We taped it from the team hotel. We were able to. I mean, that pregame show, we had a couple of good features that we'd done throughout the year on Isaiah. We did the Isaiah feature that we had about him overcoming him and his family when they went through with the tornado in Joplin. The feature that I had earlier in the week on Garrett and Mason McCormick. Some really good stuff from both teams. Good one-on-one with Jimmy. We relived a little of the 2009 game, for better and worse. Had a good perspective with Montana. We talked with an affiliate we had out there, the sports director. A great interview with Stig. We talked with Tyler Merriam and Tom Neiman. So that pregame show, and that's up in its entirety as well on Dakota News Now and the YouTube page. It was I would put that against anybody's. And I know Midco had a pretty good show too. So we have a pretty good relationship with Midco. So the two of us, I feel like we were, you could not have gone wrong, put it like that. Yep. And it was just, we stepped up the whole year. And I think, like I said, this was the best year of college football in the state's history. Obviously, SDSU had the crowning year, but we talked about obviously what USD did, Augie, list goes on. And I think we raised our game to match our broadcasting game to match everybody else's this year. And hopefully we continue to get to do this. I think it'll be, I wish it was a regional Emmy fan vote. I wish it were. Unfortunately, we're going to have to go up against obviously a lot of professional, like all the main networks. I don't know. We'll see how those things go. I've been nominated for Emmys before, and they're tough to win. They're tough to get nominated for. And I thought last year we should have gotten nominated for our coverage of this, but we'll see. I think we'll probably put in for. I think we could do a series this year, certainly since we did so many of these. I mean, I thought all of our shows were really good this year. I mean, we did 4. I mean, we did 2 live shows from Brookings and Vermilion. We did 2 post-game shows, which are all. I mean, the post-game shows they're the toughest because you're going live and you're just on the fly at that point. And obviously, this one was a little more fun because the team won. The one from USD and NDSU was a little tougher because when the home team loses, it's a little tougher to get people to talk to you. But
yeah,
although Brendan, shout out to Brendan Webb, he was stand up and he had a great interview after that because I would not have wanted to talk after that game, but he came out. But yeah, it was it was good stuff. But we should probably talk more about the game than our great coverage.
Yeah. I was not surprised. Oh my. I was not surprised, but I was impressed with the Jacks turnout of the SDSU fans. When you have Montana reporters saying, yeah, it was 60-40 Jacks fans. Sorry, Brian. We had that discussion in the stands. That's impressive. It absolutely helps. That Jacks fans were as confident as they were. There's a big help in having the Friday game. You get to pick up tickets before the team's on Saturday. That helps. I gotta say, I was impressed with Montana fans. They were all the ones I met were great. I didn't have any issues with Montana fans. They were great. And honestly, if I'm being honest, because I sat in the end zone right? And on the opposite end of the bands, the Montana fans were louder despite being less of them. And maybe some of that was the desperation of it, your first time of it. Whereas Jacks fans, when you watch that game, it felt very similar to the Southern Illinois game without the late turnover that was turned into a touchdown, is what it feels like. The team they came out sharp that first drive. After that, the offense was kind of just not quite clicking right in the first half. Then, but the defense was just lights out. I mean, this defense, I agree, this is probably going to ruffle Brian's feathers a little bit. I do agree. This might be the best defense in FCS history. It really might be, which is crazy. Outside of McKinnell, putting some Stallbird on the All-American team, barely any All-Americans, and I'm not complaining about that. I want to be very clear. I'm not complaining about that. I get it. But
well, I do think Bach would have been an All-American if he'd been healthy. And hopefully next year he will. If he's healthy next year, he'll be up for the Buchanan. I don't think there's much doubt there.
Yeah, and but that defense top to bottom was so good. It was so good. And I know a lot of people say, well, you got to hit him over the top. You got to hit him over the top. They were so ready for that. If you listen to like Brian Nuanez, who I'm sure you're familiar with probably from your time out there, I listened to their post game, and they could not believe how prepared the Jacks defense was. They said, the Montana like to hit these little quick screens and these hooks and then gash you deep, and they were so ready for it when it came that nobody even pretended to bike on the fake curl when they went deep, and that was a pass out of bounds. There we go. All right, McKinnell had Stallbird, Freeman, Gales, and Tucker Large as defensive All-Americans. And honestly, if anybody saw our episode with Zach or have followed any of his content, it is a lot of HBCU coverage. Naturally, he's got Coach Fred on there, who's awesome. I mean, what other show has an active college Division I coach on their show? That's crazy.
And I did say I caught a little bit of the one you guys had on Saturday. I think you went from 1 to 3.
Yeah,
I was able to catch a little bit of that because we finished our taping. I was kind of waiting to catch up with my wife, and you guys had a great show out there. I wish I could have gotten out there. I was kind of waiting to hook up with my wife after she had just gotten in on Saturday, but that was a fun listen. And especially, I loved having the Mad Head in the background, as you guys were at as well. So, and another guy I would add in there, I think Beanham easily could have been a. Yep. Those guys. I mean, I think we knew how good SDSU's offense could be this year. I mean, there was no secret there. But it was the defense to me that was the difference this season. I think that was the question coming into the year. They lost 2 unbelievable All-Americans in Caleb Sanders and Reese Winkleman. It showed a little bit at the start of the year, especially in that Montana State game. Boy, by the end of it, they picked up the slack. And you looked, and I put this on my Twitter page yesterday because obviously the news came down that Clifton McDowell, who the Montana quarterback, is in the portal, there's a weird situation there anyway, because he cut on his Instagram shortly after the game, he made a tweet, or he put out a post that really made it look like he's going to be coming back. Basically said, I'll fight with my brothers again next year. We're going to come back. He's got 1 year of eligibility left. He's already been kind of bouncing around, and then all of a sudden he's in the portal. I don't know what's going on there. I know the guy who came in briefly at the end, Ayat, I think is how you pronounce it. He's kind of a legacy guy. His dad had won the national title in '95, so maybe they really like him. Obviously, I know he kind of struggled a bit. McDowell, he really struggled in the NDSU game. He really looked rattled against the Bison. I thought he played all right against SDSU. He was giving them fits in that first half. But then obviously I think SDSU kind of just took away everything he had, and there was not much he could do after that. But but the point I was going to make is there's now 3 guys in the portal, because obviously Tommy Schuster somehow is going to Michigan State. Doesn't mean he's going to be their quarterback.
Right.
Poffenbarger's going to Miami, the U. Again, this doesn't mean they're actually going to be the guys there. They still have to win the job. But you could potentially have 3 guys who are going to be playing at a high, and we don't know where McDowell's going. That doesn't mean he's going to go with, but I'm just saying there's that potential that 3 of these guys are going with the FBS. And you look at the way SDSU shut the 3 of them down, and not only that, they sacked, I think, all of them like 3 to 4 times. We were kind of worried about that at the start of the year. Like, are they going to get enough pressure on quarterbacks? And by the end of the season, they were. So, I saw the comment there about the NDSU defense being better in 2013. There's a definite argument for that. I remember how good that team was when they came up here. And, of course, they have a legit argument, too, because they beat an FBS team the year. They beat Kansas State. Mm-hmm. But I'm not going to argue against Jimmy Rogers because Jimmy Rogers scares me at times. So,
well,
but no, on a serious note, yeah, the way they beat those 3 quarterbacks, especially if they end up playing at a high level in the FBS next year, it's going to add to the argument.
Yeah, if you guys have part of that too, when you look at these guys that go in the portal, right? You look at Schuster going to Michigan State. I have a hard time believing he got paid or anything like that. Because I haven't seen anything posted about, we got a huge NIL deal or anything like that. I kind of doubt that. I got a feeling that they said, well, yeah, you can come over here, and you'll be able to compete for a starting spot. I just can't believe that he's Michigan State caliber. Well, and then again, I guess I've watched Michigan State play. They're not known for great quarterback play in a long time here, but it's, I don't know. Not that Schuster was bad, but I mean, he was a pretty good quarterback, but I don't think
he is the only quarterback in the FCS to beat Mark Gronowski.
Yeah, that one time.
I mean, literally the only one. They were both freshmen, I think. If I'm not mistaken.
Poffenbarger will start. I can see Poffenbarger starting. That guy's a dude.
Although, I mean, again, he just looked so bad, but that was SDSU. I mean, it's the same thing. Same thing I've said with USD. Like, they look so bad against SDSU. I'm like, it's because they were playing SDSU. I mean,
right.
This was a generational team. It's not. If you look bad against SDSU, that doesn't mean you sucked. It means they were that good. I think people kind of caught on to that as the season went along. It's like not a knock on the other team. The Jacks were that good. This was a generational team.
Yeah, people went through
and they lead to Jared Hall or anybody else they had.
People went through and posted. I'd be interested to do this sometime, maybe if I got some time. People went and looked at the stats of all these good quarterbacks that played Montana's defense and what their stats were. I'd be curious to see what stats happened to these quarterbacks that played SDSU, because I'm 90% sure they all went way down. And you know what? For as maligned and as talked about as the sack numbers were, boy, that defense was in the backfield all day. I mean, McDowell he didn't have much. He never had time. He really never had time. I mean, there was a time, they called the blitz off the left side, but the D tackle and D end were in before the blitzer even got to the line of scrimmage. It's just the chain gang was on fire. And if you look at this defense, just the depth that it has across the board, yes, you're losing dudes. You are losing dudes. It's still going to be good next year.
There's some guys I'm looking. I mean, I'm a fan of this guy because my wife's from Howard, but I want to see Jace Cyfor. I think he's going to be I think he'll be a dude down the road. I know he didn't play much. There's other guys on the line. I mean, they're going to miss some guys for sure. Brian Williams was just a stud out of Valdosta State. I mean, I think he's only a 1-year guy, but man, I wish they could have gotten him for more than one. That dude was a revelation. I've interviewed him afterwards, and I've gushed on this guy, but Cade Tervier, that dude was Mark Gronowski coined the nickname. Actually, he responded to this because I said we should have called the nickname for Isaiah. We know Davis was Playoff Zay. I mean, we could have said that for Cade, Playoff Cade, and Gronowski called him Mr. December, and it's true. I mean, Cade had his best games as a Jackrabbit in the playoffs. He always stepped up, and sure enough, he had that strip sack in the third quarter, which very nearly led to a big guy touchdown because it popped right into Ryan Van Marl's hands, and he was just barely missed going in for a touchdown. That would have been the all-time capper for it. I thought he was going to get in. Unfortunately, ran right into an offensive lineman. But, Quentin Hicks, I think that might have been his best postseason stretch of games. I mean, he had a good career, period, but he wrecked everything. Van Marl was great. It's just up and down. I mean, we knew that was kind of their thing the last couple of years, is they've been doing the depth with the. That's one of the areas where they really turned the whole program around, was especially after that NDSU loss in the 2018 semifinals, was they started. It almost became like a hockey. You mentioned going to the hockey game. It was like line changes with the defensive line, and that's why they. Even though we knew they'd lost those two great players in Sanders and Winkleman, that's why we kind of felt that, okay, it may take a few weeks, but they'll eventually slot in and they'll be okay. This one will be more of a challenge because they're losing a few more of them, even though they're not necessarily the All-American caliber. Those two were, but they rotate enough that you feel pretty good about what they'll have coming back.
Yeah.
I totally agree with Dan there.
Right. And the biggest thing, the defense really was what the straw that stirred the drink for this team. And it was just so overshadowed by the star power on the offense. I mean, Mark's phenomenal. The Yankee twins are amazing. Hines is a beast. Isaac, obviously Zay. The O linemen were bigger stars than the defensive stars, which how rare is that?
I've never seen that. I've never seen. I said this when I did the McCormick and the Green. I've never heard of offensive linemen being. They're usually the quietest guys, and they were. Tucker, you mentioned, but there were even new guys that emerged. I mean, Griffin Wilde was quiet in this game, but he basically won the Montana State game with that touchdown. Mm-hmm. I think he had the game-winning touchdown catch against Southern Illinois. I mean, I've been hearing from scouts that they think he could be the best receiver. That when we look back in a couple of years, he might be the best pro prospect as a receiver, even better than the Yankees and Hines. Well, we'll see how that goes, but he could be the best pro prospect in a couple of years. I think Amar Johnson, I think he quietly had an 800-yard season. I think maybe people thought he would have a little bit better one after the way things went last year in the title game. He's coming back. That is confirmed, by the way, that you don't have to worry about the portal. He told me that himself. I asked him before I did a post-game interview with him. I'm like, okay, good to ask this because, I didn't want to I'm going to ask you future questions if you're leaving here. I don't want to be, I'm not trying to get anything out of you, but I don't want to ask all these questions and find out you're leaving in 2 months. But, Angel Johnson, I think that kid's going to be a stud. I mean, the difference that I've seen, we saw him in limited pokes this year, but he looked really good. And I think the biggest difference I've seen from him is he's always been fast. I mean, we saw that when he was playing 9-man at Vibrant Hurley, but now he's a train. He bulked up. Like it, mm-hmm. He makes people feel it when you hit him. So I think, that the Johnson and Johnson backfield is going to sell itself. Obviously, they're roommates already. They're looking forward to that. You throw in some of these recruits they're bringing in. I think the Maxwell Woods kid, who they, of course, flipped from NDSU. I mean, Jimmy told us, we ran a bit about that in our pregame show. Jimmy told us he's going to slot in right away. So they're planning to use him right away, and eventually that's going to be an every down back at some point. So they've got, as much as they've got these guys who are they're losing, and you can't discount that. They got a lot of guys who came in and made impacts this year that I think are going to be, that will pay dividends next year and moving forward.
Yeah, this is certainly not the end of SDSU being a very good football team. There's guys that you are really excited about in the wings, a lot of them, and that got some time or got some playing time. And I think up here, Zach McKenna said for us here that that Gus Miller might be the best, have an argument to be the top lineman in the country going forward into 2024. Yeah. And that's such a huge deal to have your center. It sucks to lose, guys like Garrett and Mason and all that, but it really is huge if you can be bringing in young guys around experienced center who can make the right calls, keep them together. They're a little bit like the quarterback of the offensive line, where they're doing stuff with communication, things like that, and kind of be the steadying force on a new offensive line. I think that's a
Yeah.
huge deal. Being able to cycle between being experienced on the outside so you can help with a new center, and then being experienced from the outside when you have new guards or tackles. I think that's a huge deal and sets itself up for success. I think that's going to be a big deal.
Let's not
But
forget Quentin Christensen was really good this year too. He really broke out as well in his time.
right,
So, I mean, yeah, I
right.
mean, it's tough. It's going to be tough with McCormick and even John O'Brien too. I mean, he got off to a bit of a rough start last year, but the Bowling Green transfer, once he settled in, he was a rock. So, but that's the name of the game. That's the name of the
And
game. In
Brian
college.
Thompson
It's great players.
says here, this is going to be the argument going forwards, and I totally get it. You better have numerous drafted O-linemen than if you don't, it's not. Responding to the best O-line in FCS history. Two things about that. Number one, we're not going to know for 3 years or so. You got to go through 2 or 3 drafts to get everybody out and eligible and all that stuff for draft purposes. Number two, just because you go to the NFL doesn't mean you were great in college, and vice versa. Tim Tebow was incredible in college and was a fluke in the NFL, and vice versa. It happens all the time where guys were not the guy in college, and all of a sudden they're Pro Bowlers and all that crazy stuff.
Well, I think Brian Witzman had a pretty good career. I mean, he was a starter for in the NFL for a few years, and I don't think he was drafted. So,
Right.
we'll see. I mean, maybe a guy doesn't get drafted, but he ends up having a great career. I mean, we'll see. I mean, I'm sure we're going to get into that debate of, because it's being thrown around. I know it's being thrown around in Fargo too about where does this team rank all time in the FCS? I've got my thoughts about that, but a lot of that's going to have to wait and see, because we're just going to have to see how these guys, not only this year's senior class, but future ones. I mean, I mentioned it with Wildy. What if he becomes a highly drafted pick in 4 years? You have to include him in this group, even though obviously this wasn't his big contribution year. He still was on this team. If he comes out, if in 2, I'm not saying he's going to be Randy Moss, but what if he's a 3rd round pick or a 2nd round pick, and he goes on to have some big career in the NFL? And that's going to only enhance what this team was. So, the legacy is it's going to take a while to actually be able to really parse what this team was, because we'll just have to see what these guys are.
And those arguments are fun. They're fun because there's a lot of ways you can go and everything like that. But to me, they get exhausting so fast because you're not changing anybody's minds. Like, I'm not going to, I mean, Brian's pretty rational, but he's going to believe what he believes. And I honestly don't have a firm opinion on it, but he's not going to convince.
For me, I'm going to go with the Randy Moss teams in Marshall as being the best. I mean, and I know even the Fargo people will say it's that 2013 team. It's due respect to them. I just think Randy Moss, Chad Pennington, that's kind of hard. Randy Moss is the greatest receiver of all time on that team. I don't know that I could put that. That's a pretty tough trump card. I don't even know who else they had on that team. That's a pretty tough card to play. When you can play that card above everybody else. And plus the FCS was such a different level at the time when it was 1AA. I think that is one legitimate knock that SDSU unfortunately has against it. Even compared to the 2013 Bison, it's just, you don't have Georgia Southern, you don't have James Madison. Mm-hmm. It's not SDSU's fault. I mean, this level has been gutted, unfortunately. But at the same time, I think this year one thing that did help SDSU was that the Valley was much better. It was much better than it was a year ago when there was only 3 playoff teams. They had the hardest schedule in the Valley. They didn't get to play the bottom feeders. And, of course, it just so happened that every other team they played seemed to be coming off a bye week, or they were playing the bottom feeders. So they kind of had that – they almost basically had a bye week coming into playing SDSU. So I think – and then, of course, the fact that SDSU didn't have the FBS game this year, which sucked. I mean, that I wish they could have played Oklahoma State or Iowa again this year. That would have been awesome. But – yeah, I think for me, I'm just going to stick with Marshall, because that and I think that
And
Martian
I
team had
don't
a
think
blast too.
I don't think most SDSU fans are arguing that this is the greatest team of
No,
all
and I
time.
agree
I
with you
don't
there.
think I've seen that or anything like that. We haven't even gotten into how the second half played out.
Yeah. No, we
But
haven't. Well, I mean, it's just, I think, the game itself, I do want to, I think you mentioned the Southern Illinois. That was the comp that I heard going into this game, was that they're very long, lean, athletic. And I saw it on the field. And I think even our guy Stone Labanowitz kind of predicted it was going to be a closer game than a lot of people thought. And yeah, I think you saw that. I mean, their athletes gave SDSU that first drive for Montana. That was the quickest first quarter I think I've ever seen, because both teams only had one drive. But I thought they were giving SDSU fits. I mean, I thought Gilman, he was 5 for 5, even though he wasn't throwing long. His mobility was a problem. But obviously I think, and Mark O pointed this out to me, and he really thought when they had that fourth down stop, even though they got the interception right after, that really seemed to take the wind out of Montana's sails. I don't know if I think they made the right call to go for it, because you are playing with, as somebody pointed out, you are playing with house money, and you aren't the one. And if you're going to pull this upset, you need plays like that. But it got to be that close and to have that kind of a play where it looked like he was going to get in, and I think that did take the wind out of their sails a little bit. But they had an opportunity right after that, because Mark made Gronowski makes one of the worst throws we've seen all year. To this day, I don't know what he was throwing at. I think he maybe just didn't see the underneath guy, or he just whatever. But again, defense just bowed up every time. And somebody pointed this out. I think the other guy you could have made an argument from MVP of that game for was Hunter Dustman, because we said all week, who heard it more than anybody? Don't punt to Junior Bergen. It had to be Hunter Dustman. Well, Hunter Dustman punted to Junior Bergen, and he never gave him a good shot to return anything. Either he put him in a position where he could not get a decent return, or he pinned them with those coffin corner kicks inside the 5. I mean, that to me, he could have been the MVP of that game. I mean, and how ironic too. And I'm going to have a feature on him Monday, by the way, because I spoke to him after the game. And we have some of those raw interviews, by the way, as well on Dakota News Now on the YouTube page. How ironic too, because his season got off to a rough start against the other Montana team, Montana State. And he admitted that too. He's like, yeah, it was kind of fun to go a little full circle here and but they kind of knew they had a new punt scheme this year. They, of course, had the new special teams coach. That was probably his best game of the year. And, even on the field goal kicking too. I mean, John Bell had some troubles getting snaps down. The field goal he kicked, he had a stutter step. So
he did awesome.
Yeah, Hunter Dustman, to me, you're never going to give the kicker / punter the MVP. We could have, although, of course, in the last game SDSU lost, you had to give it to that Taylor guy, because he was the MVP when the Hawkeyes beat the Jacks. But yeah, Hunter Dustman and Bach were probably the MVPs of that first half, and a little bit of Isaiah Davis too. But yeah, for the pressure that was on them, and because Montana's special teams probably got them to this game with what they did against Furman and NDSU, and Montana had everything they needed to be in position to win or upset at the half. I mean, that had to be what they wanted defensively to pull an upset. But they could get nothing going on their special teams. They could get nothing going on offense.
Well,
and that had to be frustrating as heck.
If you're Montana, you got everything you needed to happen. I don't want to say break, because it sounds like you're pouting or whatever, and I'm not. It's just the reality of it. That punt that hits the back of who was Durant's, I think it hit. That was just fluky. It almost looked like it got tipped by the guy who was going up to block, because the trajectory seems super weird. And it hits him in the back of the leg when he's blocking. And then I'm 99% sure this is legal, but Montana players kept trying to do it and grab a blocker and throw them into the ball when it was rolling. And I'm wondering, I've seen a bunch of teams do that this year. This isn't just a Montana thing. And I got a feeling that'll be addressed over the summer. There'll be a low-key rule deal. But if you're Montana, um, it speaks to how good this SDSU team was to have everything that needed to go Montana's way to be in this game go that way for pretty much almost for quite a while. I mean, that Yankee catch, I can see how the ref didn't call it a catch because the Montana player's glove on TV looks like the ball moving because of that maroon color, and it's not. It's the glove moving, not the ball. So I see how that happened, but that was definitely a catch. That fumble off of the back of the leg, Mark just not getting the ball out like he needed to, missing on 2 touchdowns. He normally doesn't miss those ever. And that's
a very weird intentional grounding too, which I thought
right.
I thought, I'm like, did he think maybe somebody was interfered with? And then I'm like, I've never seen an intentional grounding like that before at any level.
Right. And I'm not saying Mark played bad. It was just some fluky things that happened that kind of made it a weird game in that aspect that happened. And I'm not saying things didn't go SDSU's way at certain points, but that's completely legal, says McKinnell. That's absurd. That's wild. Kenkel says it's a gray area. Okay. So McKinnell, I'm going to go with Kenkel because he's an actual ref. But then the bad hold on the extra point, for the record, Brian, that was not Dustman's fault. That was a bad hold. We just couldn't see it from our end of the field. Talked to Mr. Dustman, his dad, at the tailgate. He was awesome. It was fun to chat it up with him. He had all sorts of offers to big schools like Big Ten schools and Pac-12 schools and stuff. And he went to SDSU over him because he wanted to punt and kick. This is what he wanted to do. By God, are we lucky to have him. But yeah, a lot of fluky stuff that happened. And this team was just, the defense was so good. And and part of it is how good they were. And part of it is, honestly, I don't think Montana had that great of an offense. People kept talking about they're going to score 28 points. And I kept bringing up, like, I don't see how that's happening. I just don't see it. But yeah, it was a weird game. SDSU really took off in the third quarter. And then once they had the lead, they knew the defense wasn't giving up anything. So they weren't doing anything to jeopardize that. And it was fun, but it kind of made it a weird, not that that I wasn't excited or people weren't excited to win the Natty. Everybody was very excited to win the Natty. You could tell that because there was more SDSU fans on the field this year than there was last year. But there wasn't the mad rush.
Well, I will say, because obviously I wasn't there a year ago. I mean, I was told by Adam Huntemer, who was there, who's been to every one of these, and he even went to Frisco when Augustana won the basketball title. So he's been there 4 times now. He told me it was going to go quick, and it did go quick. Like because what happened was I kind of went next to the bench, and I just used my cell phone to kind of get video of the bench. And we had Parker. He was back there with the camera. And he was kind of just taking the wide shot of the field, and he was going to get the trophy celebration stuff. So they start flooding onto the field. And then all of a sudden they rush toward and then before I knew it, the confetti was already out. And I'm like, geez, that was quick. And then I'm like, asked him, like, did it go that quick a year ago? Because I thought, well, maybe a year ago it probably went slower because that was their first time and maybe they're savoring. They're like, no, it went that quick a year ago too. I'm like, I guess that's a TV thing because obviously they were doing the thing on TV, but like, man, it went very fast. I could not believe that. So, but yeah, that second half, I mean, Montana got the ball first, and that fumble play was where obviously the game really turned there. I mean, that was an 18-yard pickup, and that would have had them into SDSU territory. I'm surprised it took them that long to kind of. I'm surprised they called it a down by contact. You could clearly see. I didn't feel like there was much doubt on the field that it had been a fumble. I mean, the ball was moving before he even went down, but obviously they got it right. I think fortunately for SDSU, somebody was hurt on the play. Otherwise, I'm sure Bobby Houck would have tried to run right up and run a play because I'm sure they knew it was probably out too. But that way, I mean, just everything that went wrong for Montana could have went wrong. It started going wrong right away.
Yep.
Because I mean, although that didn't necessarily hurt them, because then SDSU went 3 and out. They tried I figured they were going to go back to Davis, and he got one big run right away, but then they went 3 and out. Yeah, I mean, that was the play of the game. I agree. And like I said earlier, Marco, he said he thought that took the wind out of their sails right away, and it did.
I don't think I've seen a more impressive tackle on the goal line in all my watching football. That was absurd.
Yeah, I mean, it just, and he, man, there were moments I even watched it a few times because I think I saw the one from Matt Zimmer's wife, where I'm like, did he still maybe get a sliver of the ball over the goal line? And I've seen other angles. I'm like, nope.
Not even
that
close.
was I mean, again, I hope he's healthy all year next year. I'm glad he's coming back, because if he's healthy, he will be up for the Buck Buchanan Award. He really has not been healthy for 2 years now, which is unfortunate, because he's one of the best defensive players in the country, and I think he could be a draft pick, hopefully. I mean, I don't know about the measurables and the size and how that'll translate to the NFL, but I think one of the other underrated plays of the game that happened in the third quarter was the Hines catch. That was massive, because that was a 3rd and long. He goes up and snags that thing and then breaks free of a tackler and gets like a big gain down the sideline. And the next play was, I think, the Gronowski run. But if he doesn't get that, they're probably punting. I mean, it's just, that felt like a backbreaker right there, because once they got down to the 10, you knew they were going to get points. And then I texted Mark right after that touchdown, because Mark was in the press box. I was kind of on the field, just hanging out, taking photos. I texted him. I'm like, feels like this game's about to go sideways. It feels like the dam's about to break, because it feels like Montana, credit to them, they've hung around. They've done everything they could. Credit to them for being into this point. But it just feels like they're teetering right now on the brink. And I think right away, SCSU just punked them 3 straight plays, got 3 and out, get the ball back, get downfield, and then the Yankee touchdown, and it was over. I mean, you felt like it was over at that point. Sure enough, they get the ball, and then they get right after the Yankee touchdown is a strip sack. Could have easily had another touchdown as well. It was basically over, and I know, although I know Jimmy, I'm sure, was on the sideline remembering 2009. I'm sure the hardened SDSU fans were, and Mark Mariani was there. I was told he was there, so that ghost was there. But I even said it. I think I said it at the end of the third quarter in my tweet. I'm like, he could come on this field right now, and I don't think it would have an impact. They're not coming back. I realize stranger stuff has happened, but they're not coming back from 20 points down. So, book it this time. So it was definitely kind of a weird fourth quarter, because SDSU made some big plays, but they couldn't score. And I found it kind of weird Montana was punting even on those 4th downs. You'd think they would still keep going for it, but I think they just kind of knew they were licked at that point.
Yep, that pretty much buttoned it up, especially that strip sack. That was kind of the nail in the coffin there. That was over.
I just wish he could have taken it for the touchdown. I hesitate to say fat guy touchdown, as I'm a fat guy too, but it would have been just so awesome if Van Marl, of all people, could have rimmed that in. Yes, and it looked like he was on. It just popped right into his hand. But unfortunately, that offensive lineman for Montana got back and was able to trip him up. But it just perfectly, Cade, that was a perfect strip sack and just bounces right into his hands. I mean, it was, I barely even had time. I looked up and all of a sudden he's running. I'm like, God, it just happened so fast, especially after, because I don't think they took much of a TV timeout either, which is the other thing. Because I take a swig of water. I don't think they took a TV timeout. I think they went straight to the kickoff after the touchdown play. And it's like, usually you take a TV timeout after that. And so it just was like, my God, it's like and I texted Mark after that in the press box. I'm like, when this team drops the hammer on somebody, kind of reminded me a little of the USD game, honestly, when they had I think it was that stretch around the second, third quarter when they just, it was close. And then all of a sudden, boom, 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 boom. And they just, when this team would drop the hammer on somebody, you just couldn't stop it. It was just, they were relentless. That's a veteran team. You don't see that from that many teams. And they just, it's something to watch because you know you're not going to see it all the time.
Yeah, this team was so incredible all season to watch where you just knew it was hard to be nervous watching this team during the game. Nervous before the game, sure, I'd be nervous before the game, but once the game started, man, even when they'd get down, if people were upset, I'd just look at them and be like, "Hey guys, these guys have earned some confidence here from us." And I mean, they always delivered. They never failed to deliver, and it was this season will be talked about forever in South Dakota. And nationally, it's going to be brought up in the conversations over best teams and all that stuff. It's always going to be remembered, and that's a special thing to have.
Yeah,
It's
and
special to win a Natty, but to have a team that's in that conversation, 1-10 doesn't matter.
And I've even had this kind of debate with Mark too. We were talking about this before the game. I'm like, I still have the debate of like, is this team better than the year before? And
oh yeah,
I've kind of pivoted to that. I still think if Tucker had not gotten hurt at Iowa, that team would have gone 15-0. Oh, but maybe if who knows? Maybe I think that injury probably while I hated that he missed all that time, I wanted him to be healthy and have a big season. That probably helped develop this team better because it forced guys into roles that they had to. So much of that team was going to be built around Tucker, at least especially early in the season, with Mark kind of coming back from the injury. It probably forced guys into roles that benefited them better and made them stronger for this year. But man, I mean, it's like, this team just being so much older and more experienced. They just, as Jimmy said at one point, they've been through kind of everything. I mean, it is kind of tough because it's like, man, they were so close to beating Iowa. It's just, I feel like they probably want that game back so much because they should have won that game. And Mark, he was, the two big differences were obviously the fact that Tucker got hurt right away and Mark was rusty. It took him about 3 or 4 weeks to be, it probably took about half the season, honestly, to kind of get his feet beneath him after having missed the previous year. Because, I still remember that 80-yard bomb he had to Jaden. That should have been an 80-yard touchdown. That would have probably won the game. It was even saying the defense in 2023 was better. I don't know because, Caleb and Reese were just wreckers, man. God, it was – and, I think the playoff run was a little tougher last year. I think the playoff run was a little tougher in 2022 just because Montana State coming in here in the semifinal. No disrespect to Albany, but Montana State was a tougher team. I know they just ran through.
I don't know. Was it?
I think they were. I think Montana State was tougher. And maybe if Chambers doesn't get hurt right away, that's a different game. But there's also such a drama, and Holy Cross. Also got to give Holy Cross a lot of credit because Sluka was a hell of a player. But also at the same time, the Valley was not as good that year either.
The Valley was down that year.
Yeah, they also did have the tougher schedule. That was the year they had to go on the road to everybody. They had to play the road games at UNI and NDSU and UND. It's hard now. This team was just so dominant. I don't think you can make the argument anymore. And the way the defense played, I think the final total for the season and the postseason was they outscored people like 400 to 100 was like the number, something like that. It's 4-1. That's unreal. So that's
not unlike this year. It was what 130 something in the playoffs. 15.
There was really only one true touchdown. It was that guy for Villanova who ran Jalen Jackson. I think he ran the 25-yard touchdown. That was it. Mm-hmm. I think that was really the only true touchdown I think that was scored against them this year. Everything else was, and
the defense gave up 15 touchdowns. Mark Gronowski was responsible for more than that on his own.
I'm trying to, how many games did they give up more than one? It was probably the NDSU game, they gave up more than one. I mean,
Illinois State, UND, NDSU. I think that's it.
Yeah, I mean and some of those were probably garbage time too, honestly. So, I mean, it's just yeah. It's stupid when you look at it. Honestly, some of it is just stupid when you put it on paper, but it's real, and it'll look even more so, I think, over the years as we look back on it. Every one of and I think the best part about it was just kind of the emotions. It really hit people after the game and talking to him. Isaiah, I know I saw the Tanner Castor interview where he was crying. He came very close to breaking down when I was talking to him live. Really talked about how much, I don't think he could believe how much he always thought like high school would be the one where you're supposed to be closer to everybody, but I think he kind of realized that college is maybe this one was different. Garrett Greenfield with Mark cried at the end of that interview. I mean, Garrett Greenfield, the biggest guy who I think is going to have the best pro career, honestly. He was crying at the end of that. The Yankee brothers, that is one of my favorite interviews of all time. Those guys swagged it out, and I knew they would. Let them bring their girlfriends on too, because I promised they would. I mean, and the one thing I knew they'd wanted to say all year, and I wanted to give them this chance. I'm like, now that we're here, you can say this. Did you ever really have a doubt that you would be on this stage? And they said, nope. Some people will say this wasn't them being cocky. I think they just knew they had this kind of a team. And that if they didn't get there, it was going to be their own fault. I think that was something somebody else had said too. So Mason McCormick was the same way. Just Mark Gronowski. Of course, I know everybody's wondering right now what's going to happen with him and whether or not we're still waiting to hear. I think that portal's open for 5 days right now. I will say this: I don't know what's going to happen. I have no inside knowledge, but there was kind of an interesting line in that interview where Mark was talking with Mark. And he said, let's do this again. So maybe. I'm just saying maybe. I don't want to get anybody's hopes. I don't know whatever he does, he's entitled to do whatever he wants. And that's what I will say. And leave it at that. He's proven himself here. If he wants to come back, great. If, he wants to be closer to his family, great. I mean, that was one of the thrills that I had of that week was I went to that banquet and saw him get the Peyton Award. The only one there. I was a little surprised I was the only media member who went, but got to get the rare exclusive in a town where we all get the same stuff all the time. But I was genuinely nervous as that award was announced because I was off to the side shooting. I'm like, Jesus, this is kind of nerve-wracking. And I know Lujan was nervous. Everybody was kind of nervous. Jimmy was nervous. Well, and that was an awesome moment.
This team is so good this year. There's so many ways that it's kind of wild. But Mark winning the Walter Payton Award, I don't think has been celebrated enough.
No, it is the highest
I never
honor.
thought that would ever happen at SDSU just by function of the way the offense is played and stats that are put up in other conferences because of certain offensive schemes, things like that. I watched year after year where NDSU, I'm going to pat him on the back a little bit here. Probably, Carson Wentz should have won the Walter Payton Award. Easton Stick should have won the Walter Payton Award.
It's not even that. I think he's only the second player out of the Valley, period, to win it.
Yeah.
The only other one was Lance, and you couldn't. That year you couldn't. There was no way you could deny him that year. But we're talking the entire history of, I think, the Valley / Gateway, which has been around for a minute. And had some great players like David Johnson. It's we're talking, this is the highest award that a South Dakota player has ever had. I said this that night. Chris Streveler should have won it in 2017. I know there's a lot of Jackrabbit. I think Jackrabbit fans can admit that dude got robbed.
I can admit it now, but I didn't at the time.
Well, I mean, but again, it's for that reason. I mean, you just never know who's voting on it. There's regional stuff. You never know who's really what. I mean, there's awards are kind of fickle. But I will say that, I mean, when I'm after watching him win it, one of my thoughts initially, I thought about Austin Sumner, and I thought about Taryn Christian, and I thought about some of those guys who built this. I'm like, man, this could have been them. I'm like, especially Taryn, because I'm like, man, he could have won this. It's had points, or certainly Zach Zenner could have won it. Pierre Strong could have won it.
Yep.
I thought about a lot of those guys who built this, and I'm like, I hope those guys. I think I tweeted some of that effect too. I hope those guys feel a piece of this because they built their, even a guy like Strebler. I hope he kind of just those guys who have built the, even the Ryan. I'm sure other guys will mention maybe Ryan Barry, the guys in the Division I era. I really hope they feel. I saw Jake Winicky actually on the stage, close to the stage after the championship. I gave him a hug and said, I wish they would give you a ring because, again, this could have been. I mean, his teams could have easily gotten to I mean, they weren't as complete maybe as this one. They're a break or two away from getting to a championship game. They could have. Some of those teams they had were great. They could have gotten to that point. You never know. But they all built that foundation, and it's like. So yeah, when I've seen them win these championships now 2 years in a row, especially being there for one this year, it's like I can't help but think about these guys I've watched for the last 10 years and be like, God, I would have liked to seen Zach Zenner and Sumner and Christian and Winicky and Goddard get this. So I hope those guys genuinely feel a piece of that. And I would love it if SDSU could send him a ring just emeritus, but I'm sure those are a little expensive.
Yeah, that'd be a lot, especially for the whole gang all the way through. And Stig's not gonna like leave anybody out, so that wouldn't happen. He would make sure that was happening. Jimmy's like Stig, so that's the way that would go. I do want to comment on this just because I know we're gonna get more questions and more questions throughout the week. If you got, I'm fairly confident in saying the other JI guys are going to feel the same way, but they probably will speak a small amount on this. Mark owes SDSU nothing from Dan Furman. I hope he stays, but if he does leave, good for him. I 100% believe this. I don't want to talk much about what his decision may or may not be. I don't want to find out what it is. I'm not going to do any of that stuff because he deserves to have not us chattering about it while he's making this decision. He's done too much for this program. He's done too much for this team. He's graduated from school already. He's done everything he's supposed to do. If he decides to move on and I see any Jackrabbit fan say anything not positive about him, then I'm going to jump down your throat. I will eat you alive. I swear to God, in front of everybody. But, and that's just my thoughts on that. God bless him, whatever he decides to do. Hopefully it's the best for him and his family. We got to know the Gronowskis, have gotten to know the Gronowskis really well throughout the years here. Some of my favorite people, they're incredible. But that's my take on that. I do want to bring this up because we were talking about 2022, 2023, and I was curious just on the points per game differences. 2022 points per game, we scored 34.2 points per game and we gave up 15.8 in a weaker Valley. And you could say that, well, you played an FBS team, but they only gave up 3 points against that FBS team. Compared to the team stats for this year of 37.33 points per game to 9.27. So that is that's over a touchdown difference.
Yeah, I mean that's insane,
crazy.
And I said this at the time, and I know people were like, "Oh no!" It's like the Valley being better this year, USD having their best team in the division. These were all things that just made the case for SDSU being that historically better. It's like, I mean, when these other teams are elevating their game, and SDSU is just that dominant. I mean, obviously. I don't think NDSU was as good as they were the year before. It would have been nice if they were as good as they had been the season before, and the guys like Lipke and them had been back. But they improved as they certainly got better. I don't know if they would have given SDSU much better of a game had they been in the championship. But, I mean, Southern Illinois being back on the schedule, I thought they were a great team. I thought I'm a little, they probably feel like they gave away that game in Idaho, or otherwise they might have been deeper in the playoffs. We might have seen them in the semifinals, quite frankly, if they had gotten that game in Idaho. So, yeah, we don't want to see in this shop ever. We'll probably talk a little in this shit. I get it. They're your rivals. I would like to see it happen someday for them, just because it would be, after seeing that experience, although they have a lot of work yet to do, and their athletic department I would hope they're taking notes. I know they've got the new athletic director who just got named last week, who I think is probably a pretty good hire for them. They better be taking notes, which I know sometimes they don't like to do that or admit that. I don't know if that, that can be kind of a tough thing, because a week like what you put together, it doesn't have to do with the football team. Obviously it's the athletic department. It's, obviously the JFPA is a whole different animal. That what Ryan McKnight and them have built is,
it's incredible.
That's incredible. So, and I've talked with some Coyote people, and they admit that. They know that. I think that, the ones who are level-headed and know what they're doing. USD is going to have to do a lot of work, but I hope their athletic department's taking notes, because if they ever do get down there, I really saw what a production it is, and SDSU had planned this for so many years, because I think they knew eventually it was going to happen. You have to plan this, because if from the pep rallies to the the tailgates, I mean, it's an orchestration. And the football team getting there is just a small part of it.
Yep.
It's a lot to orchestrate. But yeah, I mean, I kind of wish every fan base could get that experience, because that is just such a fun week. And
it is. It's why I will always go down every time. It helps. I have a lot of friends who are fans of other schools who go every time. The FCS Fans Nation guys, whose YouTube we're on. I know some of you are probably watching us on there, or are watching us on there. So I'll go every time. And honestly, you talk about the wheels in motion and stuff like that. From a enjoying it standpoint, besides from an SDSU fan and loving it, I want SDSU there every year until the end of time. Don't get me wrong. But when it comes to planning and everything that you do for that, it's a lot. So you're racing around kind of chasing a schedule, sometimes a lot more than you are enjoying it. So that it's fun. And I encourage anybody where SDSU
come on, King,
go anytime. So, no, yeah.
What happens
sorry,
in Frisco stays in
put
Frisco
that up.
There.
Sorry, sorry about that.
It's okay.
I genuinely did not read that.
So
for me, Shotskis got me in trouble. I know they said there was Everclear in there, and I did a bunch of Shotskis. You weren't around, but I did a bunch of Shotskis, and
I was wondering what those were, and then I'm like, okay, that's a literal thing. It's a shot on a ski. Nice.
Yeah, and that hit me like a truck, and then we were sneaking into the camper, and it was a fireball, and I had probably a dozen beers, and that hit me in the stands pretty good.
And of course, obviously, I think an NDSU fan accused me of being obsessed with NDSU, and obviously, again, for people who don't know, I worked in Fargo, so I still have some connections up there. I like to rib them because they take it so damn seriously. I think it's a little bit of a consequence of the fact that the school is in the market. I think, one of the things I've always said, and I know some people are like, I think one of the things that I like about the way this market is set up differently than Fargo, where we don't have one of the major schools in the town, is I do work with both schools, so I'm not beholden to one. I see how both operate. I can be critical of both. I get to dip my toes in both, So I think it gives me a little more perspective on both. But I think one of the things obviously I for so many years I watched everybody from Fargo go down there, and I saw their fatigue over the years. And obviously we've talked the FBS thing over the years. I've been to one of the things that maybe differentiates me from the media guys up there who want to kind of experience what the bowl thing is like is I've been to bowl games. I covered the bowls when I was in college at CSU, which is right behind me, by the way. Got that nice little banner. This is my man cave, by the way. I'm off on Wednesdays, so that was a long time ago, Jordan. I mean, I did tailgate quite a bit, but I got into student media, so I didn't quite tailgate as much when I was a senior in June. I got pretty good.
Good question he's got there. You haven't heard of a shot ski? Isn't Colorado's thing skiing? You'd have thought I've seen him at ski slopes all the time.
We had great tailgating, but I never really remember the shot. I don't know. That was maybe not a thing when I was there. I mean, it's been a while now. I mean, God, I'm getting older. I don't want to date myself, but I am getting older. Put it like that. But I mean, the fact Colorado State won a conference title should tell you, when I was in school, should tell you how old I am, and was ranked as high as 12th in football in the FBS should tell you how old I am. But I covered a bowl game in Colorado State. I covered a bowl game when I worked in Des Moines. It was an Insight Bowl in Arizona, which I don't even think exists anymore. And I think this felt like a bowl game in a lot of ways. In terms of the way they built it up and atmosphere-wise. I think even Bobby Hauck said that. The difference between this is I felt the stakes. Like this, you felt this was a championship game. Right. Those other games, they were I've been to them. They were exhibitions. There was nothing there. And I was on the radio with some of my former coworkers in Des Moines the other day. And they're like, yeah, we love, it's like, it'd be nice, even though it's the FCS, it's still a championship. It's like, and maybe they'll start to get that now in Iowa out of the playoffs expanded. Maybe someday they'll get into the 12 seed or whatever. But there's just, I know those, I understand the Fargo aspect. Okay, yeah, it probably does. If SDSU goes there 9 times out of 10, maybe it will get old to an extent. I personally wouldn't find it that bad, but it's still, you're playing for something. Like, it would be just as old if you're going to these bowl games where it's nothing. You're not. And yes, Brian, you're right. He was a great Montana State. He had a good run at Montana State too, actually. There's just nothing in those. To me, it was like I could feel the electricity. Like they know they're playing for something. The fans know. So that was the difference for me. And even those bowl games I went to with CSU in Iowa, there were good crowds. I mean, people know this. Iowa travels great for any bowl game they go to, regardless. I mean, they have a great fan base that travels everywhere. So it's not like they didn't have good fan support. But it's a meaningless bowl. It's an exhibition. This was for a championship, and you felt that. And, I think the fact, you mentioned this too, with how great the Montana fans were. I worked in that market briefly for a year. I knew the Griz Nation is great. I know how badly they wanted to be back there, and I think that made a big difference. That having new blood in the championship game, it would have been, obviously there would have been some fun. I think Bison fans would have been more engaged this year because I think a lot of them last year kind of knew what was coming. Other than the guy who had the Fargo South tweet that I turned into the sound of silence.
Well, I feel like there'll be a lot in the future matchups and marker title games, because I still think that
I think that's going to happen
again. It'll be more heated, more rivalry, and more fun in those ones. But yeah, I think
we are starting to see.
I think correct me if I'm wrong, a bowl game atmosphere would almost feel like some of the early like a beef bowl game against Western Oregon, where it's a big crowd and there's a bunch of people there, but people aren't hyper focused on the game. They're just in the crowd. There's a lot of people talking to each other in the crowd as it's going on, because it's Western Oregon or whoever that you're beating the hell out of. Is that an accurate or inaccurate statement?
I think that's probably fair. I mean, and obviously we know James Madison had a really good turnout this year for that when they got in for the Armed Forces Bowl. And look, if SDSU or NDSU went up to the FBS, their first bowl game would be good. No question. I have no doubt. If they played in Idaho, they'd turn out. The question would be what would happen when you play your third bowl game in 4 years in the same spot. You know, because I mean, part of what their thing is in Fargo is, well, we could get in the FBS playoff because obviously, you know, with this 12-team expansion as of right now, they're letting in the top-rated group of
5 seconds.
Yeah, it's not going to last. I mean, you know, it's not. We know where things are heading, and I don't think it's going to include the group of 6 very long. You know, so again, I think when that happens, again, we've said it all along. SDSU just needs to be prepared. I think eventually this is going to look like a lot different, and you know, when that day comes and the group of 5 splits up, group of 6, whatever it is, splits off and starts another playoff, then yeah, then you want to be at that level. But for now, it's just, yeah, I would like, I can't believe it gets, you know, I would not trade what I experienced down there for any of that. I mean, I think you would be nuts to want to leave that behind. I understand part of what the Fargo thing was. Yeah, you won 9 championships out of 12. It ain't going to be, see you, man. But no, I suppose we should probably move on to some of these other questions. I guess, before we knock it off, we got to talk about the future a little bit.
That's a big deal. I mean,
lots been going on the last few days. Yeah. New offensive coordinator. It's going to be, well, funny thing is they still haven't officially announced Lujan yet at Northwestern. I don't know if that was maybe delayed because it took SDSU an extra day to get out of Frisco. Obviously, Ryan Olson will be the new offensive coordinator at SDSU. Danny Freund is coming in from North Dakota. He was the offensive coordinator there for a long time. He's going to be – now, I got to preface this because I made the mistake last night. It's co-OC, but it's not co-offensive coordinator. Apparently, co-OC is basically like a title. It's a support system thing. They're not co-offensive coordinators. Ryan is the offensive coordinator and the play caller. The title of co-OC is basically like your support guy, essentially. Like the way I understand, it's like you're kind of like your associate head coach as well.
Is it like being assistant head coach of the defense?
I think so. It's a little confusing. I don't know. It's like I wish I could negotiate that when I'm negotiating a contract. You know, be the sports director or whatever if it gave me a money bump. But you know, no, but it was a little confusing, and I think initially when I thought, I'm like, oh, they're going to be co-offensive coordinators because we know they've done co-defensive coordinators at one time with Jimmy and Bergstrom when they were here. But no, Ryan is the dude, and Freund is going to be there as support. I'm a little surprised that Freund left because there was some thought that he was maybe eventually going to succeed. I mean, he's obviously a UND alum. I covered him, again, to show you how old I am, even though I'm perpetually diminutive and short. I covered him in Fargo because we obviously, again, we covered UND too. He played quarterback when I was there. And he was the guy he actually kind of bridged their gap in their final year of Division II, and then he was their – I'm pretty sure he was the quarterback Sioux Falls beat with Kalen DeBoer as head coach and Lorenzo Brown as quarterback when USF went in there as an NAIA team and beat them. I think it was 2009. But Danny was always a very bright mind. He wasn't, you know, I mean, he wasn't their greatest quarterback of all time by any means, but he was a very good, always just a very bright offensive mind. But I think there was some thought that maybe he would be the guy who would eventually succeed Bubba. But obviously, maybe he just wants to change his scenery. You know, we'll see what that was all about.
Well, and it sounds like he is one hell of a recruiter. And I'm going to let Dallas talk more on that. He's got some insight on that and things, but so I don't want to steal his thunder that he rightfully deserves on that. But it sounds like he is one hell of a recruiter, and what a big timing intra-conference rival move to steal their offensive coordinator, not to be your offensive coordinator. But and I'm not trying to be diminutive of what his role will be. I feel like it'll be advisory in some instances with his experience that he has and all that jazz. And he's going to have a much larger role than just being quarterback's coach. But that is that is a big time flex to just reach out and know, all right, Lujan's leaving. We need a new guy. I want this guy.
Let's bring in the offensive coordinator. And, I saw Dan saying that he didn't like the smoke and mirrors. I mean, some of that was forced. I mean,
well, and
I will say that, they put up 50 on the Bison this year. I mean, it's like they did some good stuff. Okay, yeah. I mean, again, I think he's a good he's a bright offensive mind, and I like Ryan too. I mean, it's obviously we'll see. He's gonna have to he'll have his growing pains too, but it's hard to argue against what they've been doing because obviously they promoted Lujan, they promoted Eck. I mean, until somebody takes the train off the tracks, why would you fix what ain't broken?
Well, and you've got a guy who's been in the program for a little while now with Coach Olson, who knows how we run things, should know that SDSU for years has adjusted their offense for the talents that are available on offense and tailored their offense to whatever they're best at that year, because SDSU has been power run heavy, has been really heavy on pass. When you got guys like Winicky, he's got we've done that for years, and he's been around long enough, I think, to pick that up. So there is something to be said as well. Was that what Freund wants to call, or was that what he felt like he had to call with what was at his disposal? Because let's make no bones about it, the UND offensive line is not in the same class as an SDSU offensive line, even next year. He just didn't have that to work with. You don't have Schuster's a good quarterback, but he's not Mark Gronowski or Taryn Christian, or go through the list. He's not that level of quarterback. They had good receivers, but they didn't have anybody to level the Yankees. So was he just having to call those smoke and mirrors plays because he went, I got to get creative and win games off of mismatches and getting defenses out of position more than just running an offensive scheme that I would prefer to, because I don't feel like we'll be successful that way. So that's one thing to look at there. Or is that just the way he feels he needs to run? And the other thing is, with him coming over, not being the full-time offensive coordinator, maybe he wanted a chance to go and learn from a staff that he's seen have a supremely effective offense and add that to his repertoire. And if he's getting a pay bump, which from what he was making, career-wise, that's a fairly smart move outside of loyalty to UND. So, and another argument that was brought up in an article by UND 360, which had some sour grapes in it, which I get, talking about Jimmy almost leaving to be the DC in Minnesota. No, he was not. Stop it. But, Jimmy might not be there that long. Oh, relax. You get an opportunity. You see what happened to Tyler Roll, where he never left the program, and then he didn't get the job, ostensibly because he didn't have experience and connections in today's transfer portal world. Well, if you look there just south and you were hoping to be the next in line at UND, well, maybe you want to go out and get that experience then outside of the program so that you have a better resume when you do get in line.
I think that's fair. I mean, obviously, Danny does probably have some head coaching aspirations. So, yeah, you want to get a little – and we don't know how much longer Bubba's going to do it. I mean, we'll see. I mean, I did bring up an interesting point, because I spoke you all remember my dad. He had some fun – everybody kind of had fun with the observations he had during the USD-SDSU game. He had one that he brought this up to me, and we talked a little bit. Have I heard if Petrino signed on with anybody? No, I hadn't. Bobby, or if you're returning a friend to Bobby, I'm not sure. I hadn't really heard about that. No, I guess not since the Fisher thing. No, well, I think Bobby he's back at Arkansas now as the offensive coordinator, I think. My dad brought up an interesting point. Do we think Jimmy will move on at any point from SDSU if he continues to succeed?
I think eventually,
especially
he could have an offer that he would eventually move on for. I think that's
I
the
mean,
reality of life. You get offered $2 million a year or whatever to move on to a bigger program. Who knows? And some of that'll probably have to do with what SDSU can afford to pay him. What is
it's,
SDSU willing to invest as an FCS program? What does college football look like in 5 years?
well, I mean, obviously, I told my dad, I'm like, obviously he is an SDSU alum that plucks at the heartstrings. I mean, and I've heard people kind of say too that even though he's from Arizona, he's actually kind of more South Dakota at heart than that. And he's lived here now. A portion of his life is probably as long as he's lived in Arizona at this point. And he's got a young family. But if he keeps, again, he's not going to go 15-0 every year. And if he does, then he isn't. Then some really big people are eventually going to come after him. But it is a point that we'll see. I mean, it would, and he's also kind of mentioned that there could be times eventually where he's mentioned like, why not elevate this program to bigger places down the road? I don't think they'll ever elevate it to like the level of an Alabama or speaking of coaches who just left. I mean, maybe he'll put in a resume at Alabama. I don't know if he would get that right away, but I mean, maybe our buddy Kalen DeBoer might be getting that job pretty soon. So if SDSU wants that shot at Alabama, the path might be opening. But I think it will be a thing. I don't know. I mean, it would be one of those things because his defensive schemes are so good. I mean, it's going to be something where I think, I don't know. It'll be something in a few years if he keeps succeeding. They win a few more national titles. As much as I know he loves this place. Man, I don't know. He's so young too. I mean, his whole staff is so young.
I don't see it being like a 2-year thing or anything.
I don't either.
But
I don't either.
You brought up a good point. He does have. I truly believe he's got a vision for where this program can go, where it can be taken, and things like that. And I think.
I just don't know that it's. I mean, I don't know that you expect him to be here 26 years like Stig.
No, that's ridiculous. If anybody's hoping for Stig 2.0, I think you are disconnected from what the real world of college football is. However, I could see, I think he would stick it out for a while to try to accomplish his vision. And if he doesn't see that coming to fruition, then gets frustrated with that after a while, and he's getting big offers, well, then, eventually he'll take one. That's the reality.
My hope would be if he did leave, it would be for a head coaching job. I wouldn't want to, no disrespect to Ents. I kind of understand why he took that job. But I would want to see, and to be fair, if Alabama came to him and said, "Hey, we want you to be our defensive coordinator," they would probably pay him 5 times the salary he's making now just to be their defensive coordinator. But selfishly, I'd like to see him leave and be another head coach somewhere. Just that would be me. But no, I think he's going to be. I think he even kind of had a comment that we aired the other night. He's like, I know this sounds kind of sick, but I'm already kind of looking forward to the challenge of getting going next year. And I think he's probably, I don't know for certain, but I think he's really looking forward to the challenge of like, okay, he knew how good this team was. Now he's as tough as it's going to be. I think he would really relish winning a title even more next year, just knowing how much they've got to replace. I mean, that's, I'm sure he's enjoying this and savoring this. I mean, Lord knows that picture I posted of him smiling when I just said Jimmy Rogers is smiling is blowing up. But, he's probably already, he probably got back, as soon as he got back into his office, he's already starting to think about what he's got to do next year. So, I think we could be finding a pretty special coach here. And, it's one of those things where if he wants to stay here for the rest of his career, that would be great because we could have the next, Stiegelmeier. But if he doesn't, I could certainly see him going to some. I mean, his schemes. I think somebody commented to me that like there are NFL guys who think his schemes are unbelievable. So maybe he even has an NFL future if he wants it. I mean that he is that young and potentially that bright right now. That's way off in the future still. But I mean, that's even maybe that's a possibility that he could be an NFL guy down the road.
Yep. Well, and the interesting thing you brought up for me is him looking forward to the challenge. I think Jacks fans are too. I think this team was so good um, that it was hard to even appreciate how good it was, in the moment and when it was happening. I think when Jacks fans look back on this, a lot of them, 5-10 years from now, we're going to be going, man, I tried to enjoy every savor, every second, but I'm really wishing I did it even more now. But
I
you
was gonna
look at
say,
it and you,
go ahead.
was this team so good? And I felt this a little bit during the season, not in like a little bit in a petty way. It felt like this team was so good that like when USD went on their run, they became a bigger story than the better team because the better team was so good. You knew what was going to happen. Like there
We were
wasn't
probably
the
just looking for something
excitement.
new.
Yeah, and something new and all that stuff. And other teams like USD, it felt like overshadowed SDSU for a little while.
I don't think it
Not like a lot, but
overshadowed. I mean, I think it was just it was a surprise. I mean, but it was fun. I mean, I think it just added a fun element to it. Yeah, I mean it, and it was obviously there was that potential of maybe, hey, we could see both of them in the championship against each other, and the rest of the FCS was so wide open. That was the other half of it too. I mean, it was SDSU and everybody else. So the question was who was gonna see SDSU at the end of this thing. So I think yeah, I mean SDSU was, yeah, I mean Shauna says it right there. USC shocked people. SDSU was expected. And I think it just, yeah, I mean I don't know that. I think USD upsetting NDSU in that game the way they did, that was an eye opener. I just think maybe people, I don't know. I mean, I think college football is built on rivalries, and I think that would be a fun one to have be relevant in a way that the NDSU rival. Speaking of a media standpoint, yeah, I mean, there would be nothing bigger for my business than if we had a state U championship game in Frisco. I mean, the way this championship sold, I mean, good God, if we had to sell that game we would do 2 years worth of business on a state U championship game. And I'm pretty sure it would be pretty much, I mean, look, I know people will say that I don't want to start the whole attendance thing and all that jazz because that gets tiring, but let's just be honest. If both those teams played, people would be getting robbed silly back in South Dakota because there would be nobody left in the state. Everybody would be down in Texas. Even if they didn't have a ticket, all of South Dakota would go down to Texas for that game if it ever happened, which I don't know if it will. I think eventually they'll meet in the playoffs. I think that's going to happen at some point. It may be in Brookings more likely, but, we'll see. I mean, I don't know. I just think USC was a fun thing. I think it was fun to have them be relevant. And I understand if SDSU fans don't necessarily want to see it, but it's good for the FCS because what have we said all along? This subdivision has gotten really watered down. It needs teams. It needs contenders. Otherwise, is it really good if there's only 2 teams at the top every year? If it's just SDSU, NDSU, you need more than one. Otherwise it's going to get pretty damn boring. It would be nice if there are several other teams that can actually, and of course this year nobody could really touch SDSU. We'll see what happens moving forward. But
and I think you saw the SoCon's is stepping up their game. I think
Furman, I would have loved to see Furman. Furman could have easily been there. I would have liked to see Furman. That would have been. We'll see. I mean,
I don't see the CAA stepping up. They're taking a step back. I think honestly the conference you need to look at to try to bring some more contenders in a new region would be the UAC. You need Tarleton, who is investing heavily in their football, and yes, they want to go.
My feeling is they want to go. Yeah,
they want to go FBS, and they can want all they want right now. But I mean, it's getting to the point where, man, those spots are going to be slim pickings. So they'll be here for a little bit yet, I think. And there are teams down there that are invested in trying to be winning championship programs and in the SoCon and things like that, where I think that's where you got to look for some of the teams to come up to. Like, obviously, USD, being good is healthy for the Valley. I don't know. I don't necessarily agree.
Well, I know your thoughts.
For the state, but I do think I
don't think SDSU's brand has anything to worry about. I know we had that discussion.
Well, the
SDSU's
battle is
brand
for
right
Sioux
now
Falls,
is fine.
right?
Yeah.
The battle's for Sioux Falls and winning Sioux Falls. That's what it all boils down to. You have to win Sioux Falls when you're those two teams, because that's
I
where
don't
you
think
draw
Sioux
everything.
Falls is. It would take a lot right now for USD to win Sioux Falls. It's going to take more than. It would take more than one championship right now for USD. USD would have to win more than one title right now to win Sioux Falls. Put it like that. It's so right now, you never know. It could things go up and down, but right now, I think SDSU doesn't have anything to worry about there. My thing is, I've said this. I just want to see this state against everybody. It's a state against the world, basically. I want to see.
Let's be honest.
Yeah.
Everybody said for years SDSU will never catch NDSU in attendance.
They did.
And they did, and averaged more fans this year per game across the board. So it's certainly not an impossibility.
That's what I said. I mean, I've said that about them this year. I mean, this was, they maybe took a bit of a higher jump than was expected. I think we all thought they could be at least a 6 to 7 win team. But every step you take, it makes a difference. Like I said, I don't think they're going to get to Frisco next year. I think they still got a little bit of building to do. And as Jimmy said this, it took longer than they expected to get. SDSU expected to get to Frisco. But you keep putting in the work, you take your lumps, you can get there. And I think they could. It just depends. It's, the things that they have are. I think it was a USD fan or somebody said something that was kind of enlightening to me. And I thought, made me think, it's like somebody said something to the effect of like, Vermillion in terms of the leadership and the athletic department and the community is where they feared Brookings might be in the transition. So, it was kind of an honest take. And I don't delve into that stuff. I'm more just look at the athletic department, the teams and all that. But, that's probably a fair point. I mean, I don't know. I mean, they've got, we'll have to see. Can they get it's because it's more than just the football team. It's got to be university wide. I think I really like David Herbster. I think he did a lot of great things. They've got to keep moving that train forward, but there's still a lot of places where they still need to do work. I mean, obviously the ticket thing alone that they just went through was a bit of a proof that there's still certainly some issues there. But, like I said, I just want to see the programs in this state do well. I want to see the kids who are in-state kids get those opportunities to play at a high level. And, when it comes time for these two teams to play each other, I want the best team to win. That's about, that's all you ever want. I hope it's a great atmosphere, which we had this year. It usually is always a great atmosphere. Even when one team sucks, it's usually a pretty good atmosphere. When it's a good game, it's pretty hard to top. If it's a blowout, then, it is what it is. But I mean, to me, even though the game was a blowout this year, man, that was a fun week of buildup. That was the most fun week of buildup when these two teams were relevant that I've had in the 10 years that I've been out here for this game. If the game had matched the buildup, it would have been unbelievable. But I want that every single year. If we can keep that going, just for that alone. You can't tell me that's better than one team. Although I get it. If you're a fan, you probably want to see USD suck forever.
Yes.
And vice versa. If you're a USD fan, you want to see SDSU suck. I get it.
I'm looking at their schedule, and I want them to go 1-3 in their opening 4 games.
Well, I was going to say that might be a good way to start wrapping this up, because I see we've been on here now for an hour 40, and it's work night for everybody else.
Right. Yep.
Can you pull up the schedule? Let's start pulling some schedules up and just maybe quickly looking ahead to. Let's start with SDSU. Can you pull up SDSU's 2024?
You sure can. I
know they have their future schedule up on their website. But I see somebody's asking about Oklahoma State already.
Yep, they have the whole thing out on there.
Yep, they have it out. They do. And I think it's a dynamite. I think it's a dynamite schedule. I mean, I think this is one of the best. Even though there's a Division II game, although I think it's a fun Division II game, I think it's a fun D2 game.
It can be fun and something you don't want at the same time. Like if you were going to do,
they're going to beat Augie. They're going to beat Augie.
It's not about beating them, and it's not even that it's Augie. I don't want a D2 game on the schedule.
Well, I understand that, but if you're going to play a D2 game, at least be regional. Don't be Western Oregon.
Well,
play Augie, play Sioux Falls, play Northern, play somebody.
Part of it is here's my thought on this. Right, SDSU does not want Augie in the Summit. And I don't think they would have scheduled this game if Augie wasn't pretty much throwing the towel in on that for a while. I really don't. I don't think you give them that sort of momentum or credibility by scheduling them if you think they're going to keep pushing to be in something you don't want that part of. So that's just my guess. I'm totally fine with the Augustana game. I just don't. Having a D2 game on your schedule, it's hard for me to call it an out of the park schedule.
Well, we know that one of the things too that makes a difference is we know the selection committee has now said they don't really value this anymore. It's like that used to be a big, if you have a D2 game, it doesn't really count. Now they're kind of like, whatever. You know, I mean,
it counts until it's close, and then it does matter, and then you end up getting the 5 seed instead of the 4 seed, and now you're on the road in the playoffs or around early, and then all of a sudden it is a problem.
I mean, it's just
we know when you get to seeding, the arguments get tight once you're.
I think this was a result of Utah Tech dropping the game, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I
think Utah Tech dropped out. So I mean, this is unfortunately. The D2 stuff is out of it. This is mainly out of their control. I mean, these are teams dropping games with them, and they're starting to get the NDSU treatment. People don't want to play them. I mean, it'd be, we talked about the SoCon moving up in the world. They've talked about how they want to play these better. Okay, why doesn't a SoCon team come up here? Great. Furman, you want to talk about how you want to be better seated? Come up here. I'm sure SDSU would be happy to play you. But
well, I know it was,
and I know they only have so many dates, but.
I was listening to the Blue Bloods podcast with McKinnell and Coach Fred on it, and it sounded like it was a little eye-opening to Coach Fred because there's a persistent thing said all the time about HBCUs and teams not wanting from the Missouri Valley and Big Sky not wanting to schedule them, and apparently he talks to people in the know who were like, sure. And it was kind of eye-opening for him that it's not teams like SDSU dodging playing other teams. I do understand sometimes it's hard to work a home and home in with what SDSU wants to do for their home schedule because you can't have 5 home games. You have to have 6. But they'll definitely do home and homes, especially with how this is getting more difficult to schedule. I mean, you've got for the FBS games, that's why I circled it with my cursor. It's harder and harder to schedule FBS games. Good home and homes will be in the future. And if you look, NDSU is going to play Tennessee State. Teams will travel. We're going down to southeastern Louisiana. That'll be
an interesting one. That's going to be.
If you're going to Hammond, Louisiana, you'll go anywhere.
I think this is the second time they've been down there too. I think they actually went down there like in 2013 That'll be human. That'll be depending on what time they kick that off, that'll be like that'll be sticky. But yeah, I obviously the big one will be Oklahoma State. I wouldn't be shocked if that maybe got moved to a Thursday. We've seen that happen a lot with these first kickoffs that maybe it gets moved to Thursday night.
That would suck.
I don't know. Part of me kind of wants that to happen because I'm going to obviously push to try and go down there. It would be a little easy. Well, got to work it around Football Friday with high school, but I don't know. I get what you're saying, Michael, but this team's going to still have a lot of talent. I don't know. It's not going to be easy. It's still a different level of. Oklahoma State's typically been a pretty good team. At the start of the year, though, last year they didn't look very good. So sometimes they're not a very good starting team out of the gate. We'll see. Obviously,
come out and given a hell of a fight to a lot of pretty good FBS teams.
Well, obviously, we're waiting to see what happens with Gronowski. That'll make a difference one way or the other. Although, again, if Mark is not back, I still feel very confident with Chase Mason.
Chase
I
Mason
do.
feels very Jabari Gibbs to me. And we saw what Gibbs did in his first P5 game. So
Yeah. And again, I love their backfield with Amar Johnson. I think he'll take a big step forward. They got a lot of weapons back there. The question will be how the offensive line hold up, especially against Big 12 defenses aren't exactly, they're not known for being too physical. They're going to have a lot of guys to replace on the defensive side of the ball. That's going to be a challenge because Big 12 offenses can be very up tempo. But I tweeted this earlier today. But let's say they find a way. The next 5 games are pretty. Now, Incarnate Word could be difficult too because Incarnate Word usually gets some good transfers in. Usually, they have a very good quarterback.
mm-hmm.
I'm not saying that's not necessarily just with what SDSU is replacing. It's not necessarily it's not a gimme compared to some of the home openers they've had before. But nonetheless, they'll be favored in the next 5 games. Maybe the toughest one in there would be UNI, although UNI's got so many issues right now. I mean, that could be UNI's first home game.
UNI is going to be in tough shape. They've lost both of their coordinators already.
Yeah, and that could literally be their first home game, although they're claiming they're going to try and get one before that. But I don't think they're going to be that good. So if they beat Oklahoma State, that gets them to 30. Then they win their next 5. That's 35 straight wins. That would be the second all-time in the win streaks. 39 is the record from NDSU. That was stopped a couple of years ago during the spring season. They go into Fargo seeking 36.
That
also,
will
as a
be
reminder,
a Hoppin marker game.
Also, as a reminder, next year is when the new TV package goes in that ESPN starts like they have with the Big Sky. I think they'll televise 1 or 2 national games next year. Now I'm sure Midco and WDAY might fight that. I don't know how those things
just a little bit. Oh, they'll be pissed.
But if SDSU, that might be a game day situation too. I mean, as much as you'd hate to see it go up to. I mean, if you guys hated the idea of it going to Vermilion, you'd kind of hate to see it go to Fargo again. But
oh yeah,
I guarantee you, if SDSU is playing for a 36 straight win in Fargo, that's probably the game ESPN wants to televise nationally.
Yeah, I agree with that. Do you know anybody who has answers with the Missouri Valley football scheduling department?
No,
because they're the laziest, most garbage scheduling department on the planet. How do you not have NDSU, the marker game, particularly the marker game, or
at the end of the year.
State U game at the end of both of them?
I don't know. They had it perfectly done a few years ago, and then they just
You've got a couple teams. You give 2 or 3 teams this garbage with no bye week during the conference schedule. Most of them get them, but not a couple of them. Oh, guess who one of those is? SDSU for the 3rd straight damn year in a row.
Yeah,
It's lazy. It's not thought out. It's just slapped out there. They're not putting any effort into it, and it's honestly disgusting. It's they put about as much effort into it as they put into their damn social media presence or even promoting the conference in any form or fashion other than waving the flag when SDSU or NDSU wins the damn national title, and it's gross. But I mean, the Big Sky's out here. The Big Sky's out here inviting Sickos Committee to the FCS National Championship game and getting them Big Sky swag, and they're getting all this exposure from that, and they've got actual media days, and they've got all these things. And what is Patty V and the gang doing? Was she even there? I assume she was, but honestly, at this point, I'm not sure. Is she more busy running the Pioneer League at this point?
At least they're taking a step forward with the ESPN deal. At least they're taking hopefully something's moving forward. I don't know. I mean, I've got to be careful how much I obviously criticize them as a working media member, but yeah, I mean, I don't understand this. I don't understand how their bye week keeps falling right before they start conference play. That seems just bizarre. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. And like I said, I don't understand why the rivalry games in this league don't come at the end. I mean, Big Sky does it right. The Brawl of the Wild is always the last game of the year. Always, always, always. There should be, especially since they've especially since they've got it set up in this conference to where SDSU, NDSU, USD, all those schools will be playing each other. Those rivalry games, as long as they're in conference, are locked in. There's no way that they won't play each other. The Dakota schools won't play each other. So why wouldn't you?
Why can't you do that?
Why wouldn't you have? However you want to do it. The end of the season should have UND, NDSU, USD, SDSU, the marker game, USD, UND, however your permutations are of that, whether you wanted to end it with the marker game, whether you wanted to end it with the in-state games, whatever. And we had it a few years ago. That's the part I don't get.
It was like that for the longest time, and then they added UND to the conference, and then it went away.
Well, I mean,
it's unbalanced. Shut up.
But it was like that even a few years ago. I mean, it was basically like that. We had them in November. I mean, I know obviously at the Hail Mary game. I mean, that was, at least they had that, and it was North Dakota State in early November, the first week of November, and then it was USD, and then I know they ended with UND. But at least those games were in November. You're ending the season with all those teams. I mean, it doesn't make sense that you're in November and you're ending with. It doesn't make sense to have Murray State, Missouri State, and Southern Illinois in November. That makes no sense. So I don't know. That's bizarre. Yeah, same.
Well, and to Dan, it's not the same deal for scheduling wise. They might decide, like, they might move the game a day, or they might put a different time on the game, but they're not putting out the conference schedule. That's they're going through the conference schedule, looking at what games they want and picking from those. It's not about that. And I saw some other fan bases from the MVSC going, like Missouri State, like, well, we don't have any conference rivals. Well, tough shit. You've been here longer than anybody. Sorry you don't have a rival. That doesn't mean you shouldn't have other rivalry games at the end of the week. It brings attention and focus to your conference. The Big Sky's talked about every damn year at the end of the year because of the brawl.
I mean, nobody gives a shit. Nobody gives a crap that Portland State doesn't have a rival. Whatever. Who cares? I mean, but and whatever. I mean, it's just some schools don't have a rival. When you have conference, not everybody has a rival. Whatever. I mean, it's just deal with it. But I was going to say, two other ones we can look at before we go. I'd say let's take a look at maybe USD and NDSU schedules since they're the other two ones that we mainly pay the most attention to. Yeah. I think USD might yet add one more game, because obviously we can go to 12 next year. This is kind of a odd year where they can add. Oh, they had Portland State on there. I didn't know that.
That's a tricky start to their schedule where they could be in trouble if
I did not know they had Portland State on their schedule.
It's a long travel. It's kind of a weird field. Portland State has years where they're kind of good. Not very often, but it's possible. Yeah. USD outside of the dome on the West Coast. And then you got Drake and then Southern Illinois.
Oof, I mean, I'm still guessing
the season again.
I'm still guessing they might try to add a game maybe on the 31st. Just because, again, they can. I mean, it might be a Division II team.
Yeah, they only have 3 out of conference games. That does not help.
Again, you can bump up to 4. There's still time. They might just try and add a late team. I mean, that could certainly be a possibility. I don't know. I have no knowledge there. But, I mean, it's going to be interesting for them. I think they got most of their offense back. Obviously,
their offense wasn't that good, though.
But you would think they're going to get a little better.
The problem, they were carried by the defense, which is why I'm hesitant
that is a big
thing.
That is a big thing. I think good. Well, I think the offense will take a step forward. You would think with an extra year under Josh. I think they really need to unleash Aiden Bauman. I think they were a little too conservative there. And I think the Charles Pierre thing, they kind of know what they have there a little more. Plus, I think they got a nice transfer from Iowa State. But you're right. The defense is going to be the key, because the defense really was great for them up until obviously the last NDSU game. It kind of when the wheels fell off. But yeah, they lose Mogensen, who was the defensive player of the year, Webb, who was just phenomenal on the field and off the field. That cornerback Miles, what's his name? I think the cornerback declared early for the draft, so he's gone. That's a lot. I mean, those are a lot of good pieces, but Travis Johansson's a really good defensive coordinator. I mean, Jimmy himself has shouted that guy out by name. And, Jimmy's not sunshine pumper. When Jimmy says somebody by name, he has respect. So, and frankly, I would think Johansson, whenever Bob decides to call it up, he's probably their Jimmy Rogers, quite frankly. So we'll see. I mean, that's a guy who I would think even in the year they had 3 wins, I thought their defense was all right. It just got worn down because their offense was that bad. So I think we'll see. I mean, you're right. That's a lot of pieces, but yeah. I mean, obviously they'll get Drake. I mean, that Portland State game is probably the swing game. The one thing I would want to see for them taking a step forward in terms of them actually continuing to be a legitimate, like, top level FCS top 8 seed type team. I want to see them go give Wisconsin a game. This is not a great Wisconsin team that's coming back, but they need to start if they're going to start ascending to that level of, okay, you're going to be a top 8 team every year. Eventually you want to be a national championship contender. You got to go in and at least give these teams in the FBS a game. Not saying you have to win it all the time, because obviously SDSU hasn't won all these games, but you've got to, and they didn't, for what they were, they didn't play that badly against Missouri this year, especially considering Missouri ended up being way better than anybody anticipated. But this is not a great Wisconsin team. I mean, they've got a lot of holes. It's a game I would like to see them at least give them a run. If they give them a good run and are in that for, say, 3 quarters, I think that'll bode well for them moving forward. But that Portland State game is going to be an interesting swing game, especially if they don't add another game, because if you win that and you're 2-1, then you're in good shape. We'll see what Southern Illinois has got coming back. I don't know what, obviously Nick Baker's finally gone. So right. It's going to feel like he's been there for 10 years. But that potentially, though, if you beat Southern Illinois, Murray State, that should be a win on the road. UNI, we don't know what UNI is, but UNI, that should be, that's potentially right. Potentially if you beat Southern Illinois and you beat Portland State, you're in good shape. But boy, the end of the schedule could get kind of brutal, because obviously you have to go. Youngstown, I think they've had some portal issues, but I like what Youngstown's building. They've been getting better each year. Obviously, you got to go to Brookings, which, we'll see. that's not
they
been
haven't had great luck there.
Well, they haven't scored a touchdown against SDSU in a while, so we'll see. They'll, obviously we'll see what they can do, but they should beat Indiana State, obviously, but then, boy, right there at the end, 2 brutal games. You go to North Dakota. That's always been a tough place for them to go. And then, trying to get revenge at the end of the year against the Bison, which I'm sure that's the schedule we'll look at next. Right now, North Dakota State's got a lot of people coming back. That's going to be a tough one. And that could be for big seeding as well. So, but I would think the Coyotes are at least still going to be a 6 to 7 win team. I think. I don't know if they're going to get back to 9 wins, 10 wins, but we said this along. They should still at least be a 6 to 7 win team. That's where the baseline should be. And then, some things break their way, you're back in where they were this year.
Well, if they want to keep their momentum with the fan base, they have to make the playoffs.
Yeah,
and win a game.
You just have to be a playoff team. Keep making the playoffs. Hopefully, kind of the way SDSU was there from 2013 through 16. 2013 through 15. Just keep being a playoff team, and or the ABC, ESPN. I can say it. No, they don't care about it. Especially next year, Dan. You're right. They're going to have we've got an expanded FBS playoff. It's going to be 12 teams next year, but the nice thing is they are going to keep televising the FCS title game on ABC. That's still good exposure. That's still good for the thing. We'll see what the rest of the playoffs look like. I don't know if they'll move it off Sunday. I wish they would. That's been a TV deal. I wish they would have played it on Thursday or Friday, frankly, this year. I don't think Saturday would have worked better because you still had NFL games. But, it's no secret. And I don't blame them. The FBS is the bigger cash cow, and that's the bigger interest. But, would it be nice if they marketed it a little bit better? Yeah, but it is what it is. I think it is what it is, and that's
The
what it
reality
is.
is FCS level is the FCS level and will always be frustrated with the exposure and everything else that that FCS does or does not get. And it it's incrementally getting better. You didn't used to see um, FCS conferences with regular ESPN games like the Big Sky and the Missouri Valley do now, and the HBCUs for that matter. Um, so it
All,
is getting better and growing.
all I know is the people where I work and the people who advertise in my market, they care that it's on ABC when our team is in the championship game. So
I bet they do.
I don't care if somebody in Shreveport or New York City is watching the FCS championship game. I'm pretty, as long as I'm working at an ABC affiliate that has the FCS championship game in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, when South Dakota State or if South Dakota ever gets in it, I'm pretty damn happy. So, I do, yeah. But like I said, I certainly wish that. That's what I've been hearing. I don't know. I've heard it's going to be during a basketball game. I really wish they would do something like they did with the S-Jack a year ago, but I've heard it might be just during the ceremony. But we'll worry about that later. Let's wrap this up because we've been on for 2 hours and it's a work night.
Oof, yeah. Let you get
But
to bed.
well, all of us, yeah, it's a little later than normal. But lastly, let's look at the bison, the bison. I don't know who I'm going to root for in this one. I'm going to root for the asteroid in the first game. The asteroid to rain down upon everybody. The battle of the buffaloes, the battle of the bison and the buffaloes. That's going to be again. I said this earlier today on Twitter. I would not be shocked if you see SDSU, Oklahoma State, and CU, NDSU getting national TV games. I think those will be pretty hot tickets. I think. Obviously, you get Tim Polasek, who I think is much not necessarily the best news for SDSU fans, but I think that was the best hire for them. I like Polasek. That was I understand the Tyler Roll thing, but I think he was the right hire. I remember him from when I worked out there. I think they kind of need a kick in the butt with that program right now. I think they've gotten very complacent. That's not necessarily a knock on Matt Enns, but I think they needed that kick in the butt, and I think he's the right hire for them. Quietly, that's kind of a nice schedule, non-conference for them too. Honestly,
It is.
I mean, you get Tennessee State. I think that's Eddie George's teams, if I'm not mistaken, right?
That's right. Yep.
Yep, and they had the Buck Buchanan winner this year too. So, I don't think he's back next year, but I mean, that's going to
hammer him. But
yeah, they're going to hammer him, but it's still going to be kind of fun. And then the following year, I think you mentioned it, they go out to Nashville. But yeah, then go to East Tennessee State, who was a playoff team in the past. I know they slipped this year. Towson, again, another team that had been good, but has obviously slipped. I mean, that's
at the time they scheduled the games. Those were 2 good games because people have to realize you schedule these games 5-6 years out, and you hope they're still good. ETSU was a playoff team a couple times here in the last couple of years.
Towson, and obviously you're happy it's not. They're all D1 games. These are all. Yep. There's not a Pioneer League team in this thing. Obviously you're pretty happy with India. I think you're pretty happy. They're new teams coming in mostly to Fargo. I think. Obviously, I know they've seen Towson before in a title game, but yeah, I think this is.
So, Brian, just so I can address this, so I don't forget. I never ever bet on SDSU football games, even tacos. However, I will go out for tacos with you absolutely after the game. I want to pick the place because there's 2 places I love in Fargo to go for tacos that I wish were down here. So I'm absolutely done.
But yeah, looking at the rest of the Bison schedule, I mean, obviously we'll know a lot about I'm really intrigued by that opener. God, I'm really intrigued. I don't know what Colorado's going to have.
Beat the shit out of them.
I don't know. I mean,
I don't think, and
they're going to have a lot of experience back, but I mean,
I don't think Dion is the type of coach who is going to be good at having his FBS team focused on this game. Hockey come.
I'm certainly hoping they. I hope he didn't freeze up on me there. I'm certainly hoping they beat them up a little bit because Colorado then goes to Colorado State the following week, and I would like to beat the Buffaloes in Fort Collins for the first time in about 60 years. So wouldn't hurt me at all if they if that happened. You still there, Brendan? I think his I don't know if his screen froze or if mine's frozen. Yeah, I remember Dion turned down a home and home with NDSU, and he was. I did not know about that. Oh, this might be a rather inglorious ending to the. His is frozen. Okay, might be a rather inglorious ending to our season, which has been a pretty good one, but it is getting late now. Yep, there we go. I think he's off. Well, this is the end. Yep, I'm on. I see that. Thanks, Shauna. Hopefully he'll hop back on here in a second, but we need to wrap up anyways because we've gone way later than I think anyone anticipated. Yeah, we'll see, guys. I'll try. We'll try. I'm hoping. You never know what. I'll keep you going. No, I need to get sleep too. Shoot. But yeah, I just want to thank everybody who's been on the streams this year, tonight, all year long. This was a lot of fun. Wouldn't have kept doing this thing if there wasn't a lot of interest in this all year long. Brendan and I had a blast. I know we stayed up a lot later sometimes. Sometimes I get a little long-winded, so that's probably why we went a little over long. As you can hear, my voice is leaving me a little bit. But thanks for joining us all year long. This was a lot of fun. Lord willing, we'll be back next year. You never know, but see what happens. Looking forward to another football season. This was a great season, obviously, and hope you guys enjoyed it as much as we did. Enjoyed the comments, enjoyed the feedback. As an issue fan, yeah. Well, it's just been. I think it just showed that there is passion for this level of football. Certainly in the Dakotas, it's unmatched right now between SDSU, NDSU, USD, and certainly we even had a lot of national fans. I know this is on Fans Nation too, and that's been a big boost. So it's been a lot of fun to get in on this. I've got Brian. I've actually got Brendan texting me here, so see what he says here real quick. See if he just wants me to wrap it up. But I'm assuming that's kind of what he wants me to do. But his computer just kicked off the internet. So I think I'll just wrap this thing up. Let me let him know. But yeah, so we'll have thanks again for everything this season. Congrats to the Jackrabbits on what was just a phenomenal season. I can tell you they were just as great to work with professionally as they were to watch. Just a great group of kids, and those seniors, I'm going to miss them. A lot of those guys I've covered since high school, the Yankee boys, Mason, the ones that are South Dakota natives, and some of those who are in Iowa. It's going to be tough not watching them anymore, but I think some of them are going to go on and hopefully play in the league. They were great kids, and I think a lot of them are going to go on to great things in life, whether that's football or not. And hopefully remember the memories, because this was a hell of a team, and it was a hell of a run watching this team. And I hope you enjoyed it as much as we enjoyed. I hope you enjoyed watching it as much as we enjoyed talking about it. And hope to be back next year doing this again. Hope to be on another national championship run as well. So you guys get some rest tonight, get some sleep, enjoy the off season. Enjoy basketball season too. Hopefully we'll have a nice fun season as well, and a fun Summit League tournament here in a few weeks. And then we will get this all rolling again. Spring football will hit sometime in March, April, but the real fun will of course begin toward the end of July and August, when this thing all starts again. And we will get another season of college football. Road to Frisco will start one more time. Once more, as the Jackrabbits will go for a three-peat. We will see who will be down in Texas. It's only about 12 more months away. Can't wait. Y'all have a good night. All have a good off season. We'll talk to you again later. And on Jackrabbit Illustrated, and of course, join us on Dakota News Now. Brian, they're going to three-peat. They're going to do it. They're going to do it. Or at least NDSU won't get there. I don't know. But be sure to join us, Dakota News Now. We're going to have a lot more stuff coming up. and join Jackrabbit Illustrated as well. Thanks for joining us all year long. Peace.